Hello, I'm Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Today, looking for casual sex? There's an app for that. Today, the stream asks, is technology transforming the way young adults hook up? Our digital producer Malika Bilal is here looking out for your live feedback, and Malika she's our guru of all things digital. So, it's the end of the week for us at the stream. If I was looking for an app for a little casual hooking up, what is there out there for me?
I'm sure this is purely for research purposes.
Absolutely, I'm taking notes just for the show.
Of course. Well, a quick search reveals that there are several apps that college students are actually using these days. There is Bang with Friends, which I pulled up on my screen here. There's Tinder, and there's Grindr, all of them being used heavily. And now, for those of you at home, we want to know what you think. Join the conversation. Do you use these apps? Do you shun them? We want to know. So tweet us with the hashtag AJStream.
So many apps, so little time. Sitting right next to Malika and myself in the studio, we have Donna Freitas. Donna is the author of The End of Sex, How Hookup Culture is Leaving a Generation Unhappy, Sexually Unfulfilled and Confused About Intimacy. Donna, it's good to have you in the stream.
Thanks for having me.
You'll be talking and hearing from Donna in just a little while. And remember, you can stay in touch with the stream on Facebook. Check out some of the stories that we've been covering, news updates, behind the scenes, photos, and so much more. So all you need to do is do what I'm doing right now. Just go to facebook.com/AJStream, and you can too be in the stream.
I'm John Wunderlich. I'm Policy Director at the Sunlight Foundation, and I'm in the stream.
Now, it's been happening on college campuses since the 20s and was part of the free love era in the 60s. For generations, college has been a place where young adults explore their sexuality, and today's co-ed is no exception. But has technology kicked off a new sexual revolution? Pop culture and social media depict an atmosphere where college students engage in casual sex with no expectation or desire for a deeper commitment. And it's not just here in the United States. The website Shag at Uni says that its purpose is to keep university students in the UK, Ireland, Australia and South Africa, I'm going to quote here, get laid any night of the week and not have any of the strings attached with dating, end of quote. Social media sites like Facebook have also become a platform for sharing stories about casual encounters. And one page on Facebook asks students to post your craziest, raunchiest, most ridiculous story or find out who you met last night. But is this culture reflective of what young adults really want? Or has the generation used to oversharing created an environment around casual sex where some feel that they must join in to be accepted? So, joining us via Skype to talk about this is Jacqueline Friedman, founder of Women, Action and the Media. In our Google Plus Hangout, we have feminist blogger Soraya Shamali, college student Lisa Mogliansky, and recent college graduate Evan Kurtz. Thank you to all of you. It's great to have you in the stream. I want to get you in the mood for this conversation and get you into the idea of what hookup culture is. I found a little documentary trailer called Spitting Game, The College Hookup. Have a listen to this.
I don't think you can name one. I cannot name one single guy that would go home with a girl at 3 in the morning, wasted, just to make out and have her sleep next to him, and then say, "Hey, let me take you home in the morning." I cannot name one single guy.
I can name a few.
Girls can name them. Girls can name them. Guys can't.
What's good about hooking up in college? There's lots of choices.
Hooking up? No, I'm not familiar with that term.
I had a friend who threw up on his girlfriend in the middle of drunken sex.
You know, I like to always say I'm not an alcoholic, I'm an alcohol abuser, you know.
And sometimes there's a real fine line between the alcohol abuser and the alcoholic.
Is this what you came to the party for?
So, you know, first, second, third base, home run, it doesn't matter.
Do you think there is a hookup culture?
Most of the time when I did have hookups, it was because I was either drunk or I was on drugs.
Okay, girls are getting the screw here, but from the guys I've talked to, they deal with the same things. So it's something that both guys and girls deal with.
As far as like how to, you know, get with a girl, kind of what they refer to as spitting game or having good lines and things like that.
There's so many horrible things that come out of just one drunken night of
meaningless sex.
It doesn't look like these students, Donna, need any help or any apps or any technology. And this documentary was a couple of years old. You spent a lot of time studying students' sex lives. What difference, has actually having apps and social media made to their hookup lives?
Well, I think in many ways it's exacerbated the performance part or the misperceptions of hookup culture. Because when I talk to college students in private with many, many layers of privacy, what they often tell me, both women and men, is that they're not really into it, they wish for something else. And one of the things that's really interesting about social media, I think, is we're essentially raising a generation of performers, of people who are really good at acting how they think everyone else wants to see them act, except privately they often feel very differently about things. And so when you talk to students about hooking up, people always ask me, well, is it about pleasure? Are they worried about STIs? Like, what's going on with hooking up? And students almost never talk about pleasure. And so one of the things I learned very quickly was hookup culture was not about the sex. It's not about enjoyment. It's mostly about being able to boast about it afterwards.
I'm some way away from hookup culture, although Malika helped me get back into it. Thanks, Malika. But Evan, you're just brand new. You've been digging around in university and college for a while. You've only just graduated. When was the last time you had a date?
The last time I had a date would have to be my freshman year of college, so it has been quite a while.
Wow. When was the last time you hooked up?
Probably a couple weeks ago, in my last week of college.
Okay, and in your most successful weekend of hooking up, how many hookups?
3 or 4.
Wow, that was some weekend. Now, where do apps come into it? Where do social media apps come into your sort of dating hookup lifestyle?
Of course. I think my personal experience is probably a little more removed from the use of apps as far as using it as a way to find hookups. I think college is a pretty insular place, and you can just walk down the street and be in a bar with 200 people your own age immediately. It's not doesn't quite require the use of social media. What I do think it's changed is kind of a post hookup interaction. I think has changed a lot, where kind of that interpersonal nature of it. Now that after meeting someone, whether it's a hookup or in whatever context, requesting them on Facebook, communicating through that or text, as far as it kind of moves away from after you've hooked up with someone, there's that expectation that you're going to actually have real face-to-face conversations again.
Well, our community is weighing in here on the central question of the show and social media, and is it changing the way that young people are hooking up? Mikey on Facebook says, social media doesn't make people hook up. It allows them to do so with more frequency and with less class. A tweet from Eric who says, there have been several major shifts in sexual behavior unleashed by technology. The internet is not the most important. But Sakura Passion has thoughts. Jacqueline, I want you to listen to this tweet. Sakura says, it seems the whole notion of hooking up is rather public. Apps are just another way of accomplishing that. Jacqueline, I know that you don't even agree with the concept of hookup culture. Tell us why not.
Well, people have been having casual sex, especially young people, although not exclusively young people, since people have been having sex. It's not a new invention. It's just a new buzzword. We know that Lisa Wade, who's a sociologist who blogs at Sociological Images, did an extensive study of hookup culture, quote unquote, and found that less than 15% of all U.S. college students are doing anything they describe as hooking up, which can include making out more than twice a year. So it's not an epidemic. Most college students aren't doing it. My concern is, if you're hooking up or if you're in a relationship, are you there because you want to be, because you're getting something out of it, and not because you feel pressure? I think that the social media component here, I agree that there's a lot of bragging, but I think you have to also understand that bragging doesn't always reflect reality. So if you ask men and women to say how many sexual partners they have, for example, the men will give you a much higher number than the women. If you hook the same people or an equally random set up to a lie detector test, you find out that men and women come up with about the same number.
You're nodding, Donna.
Well, I think Jacqueline and I agree on just about everything. And one of the things that you said, though, that is interesting is I spend a lot of time correcting people about what a hookup is, because I spent all this time interviewing students and getting their definition. And in our culture, we tend to equate a hookup with casual sex. And students almost never do that. They say it's anything from kissing to sex. And they will do that over and over again. And I think what's really important when we're thinking about a culture of hooking up is there's a reason why they're defining it so broadly, and it's because they want their experiences to count, so that they can say that they're a part of it, that they've done this. And a lot of this, again, it's about being able to be public and say, I'm a part of this whole thing. I can count myself as someone who's hooked up before, because there's so much pressure.
I agree with you about that. There's a study recently out of University of Wisconsin at Eau Claire that shows that 77% of U.S. college students think that their friends and their peers are hooking up more than they are, but a full half of them disapprove. So I don't think that we can make the generalization that most students want to be included in quote-unquote hooking up.
Though I would say I have similar statistics in terms of you have students who will say, I totally disapprove of this culture. I wish people would value love and long-term relationships because I do, but everyone on my campus, values casual sex and hooking up. But they also talk about how they feel a lot of pressure to go along with things in public.
Let me just ask, I know the community is dying to get in, but I was like, Lisa is a student.
Exactly.
We can't have these non-students talking about students.
Femi, actually, before we go to Lisa, what I just pulled up on my screen, Lisa, you wrote this piece that I want us to reference.
Oh, you read my mind.
Why I'm uncomfortable with the hookup culture, and in it, I had to pull this out. You say, I feel like a visitor to my home planet, but never as much as I do when I observe the alcohol-infused courtship behavior that prevails at college. Tell us what was going through your mind when you wrote that.
I think, to be honest, the reason why I'm so often confused is that I'm the only sober one in a room full of people, blackout drunk people who aren't going to remember what's happening the day after. But in general, I think I agree with a lot of what's been said. I don't think the majority of people are quote-unquote hooking up, and I agree that there's a lot of ambiguity in that term. But I do think that a lot of people, because of social media, because Facebook is a highlight reel of what's going on in people's lives, people don't tweet, wow, I sat in my dorm room and felt sorry for myself last night. People think that everyone else is doing something, and they want romantic validation, they want love, whatever you call it, and they think that hookup culture is the only way to get it, and I worry that that's why a lot of people participate.
Do you think, I'm listening to everybody talk about the role of the technology, and it seems to me that before we can even get to people using the technology, we're failing to talk to them about issues like privacy, about issues like consent, about performance and mass media. So by the time they're engaged at the college level and they're using apps or they're using Facebook, it's sort of symptomatic of other things that have happened before. Does that make sense?
Lisa, does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think that it's not so much that Tinder makes it easy for people to hook up. I think most people do it in person, just with a person they don't know very well. But I do think it's reflective of desires that people have, that it's not a new phenomenon, but the voyeurism of Facebook and of the internet, I do think ups the ante a little bit, increases the pressure, and makes people feel like they're the only ones with doubts when that's not in fact the case.
Lisa, that's a really interesting point, because I'm looking at Terp crushes right now, and here's a tweet I'm going to share with you and the whole world. Brian T. I still regret the night that I could have told you how into you I am. I totally blew it. You're still one of the hottest guys. I don't know if Brian T watches Al Jazeera, but now the whole world actually knows about it. So is that for you, Evan, and your mates who sometimes go on social media online and do a little bit of your sort of romantic hookup life out there? Is that even a consideration that anybody can read what you're up to?
Yeah, I think that's not something I think is thought of a lot. I don't think that when you approach social media, you're thinking about who it's going to reach. I do think, though, the point's kind of been made. That's just kind of indicative of the culture that's there today. I mean, I think things just are a lot more public these days, especially on a college campus where you have such close communication and contact to other people. That I think the expectation is most hookups are to eventually become public, either through friends of one party to another, till a lot of people know. So I think it's the act itself, kind of, though certainly an intimate, private act, is kind of spreads till it's usually public knowledge, at least to some degree.
So you often think of the women in the situation having a lot of pressure, but what about the guys? To turn it round on its head, do you feel like you have to actually go out and have as many hookups as possible, and it reflects on you as a guy and your prowess if you do it?
I mean, I certainly think that there's an existence of that to a degree. I mean, I think kind of that idea of a hyper-masculinity kind of is intertwined with the idea of how many girls you hook up with. And I will say, in situations, whether it's 8 guys in a house as you often have in college, or a fraternity house or things of that sort, there those conversations do come up with the idea that you're supposed to be. It's kind of like the expectation that you would be hooking up with girls, or in a relationship is fine also. But if you're not doing either, maybe if you just have an interest of just, not engaging, whether it's hooking up or romance, that there's something, inherently wrong with that, or that's it's curious at least. And there's the questions. And I think maybe to avoid that and try to just appear normal, appear masculine, whatever the reason may be, I do think a lot of guys are perhaps pushed towards maybe going out and seeking a hookup culture.
Well, Lisa, on that same topic of peer pressure, I'm wondering your thoughts on that. Frederick tweets in, it's called going with the trend. If you stick to the conventional way of doing it, then you're old-fashioned and you're outdated. And Shauna says, I definitely think hookup culture is horrendous. People act like it's an obligation and not a personal choice. Is there peer pressure?
I think there's definitely peer pressure in the sense. I think there's pressure in the sense that there's pressure to be involved romantically with someone in some way, and that absent an alternative, absent a traditional dating culture, there's tons of pressure because you don't want to be, the only one who's alone, right? So you want to hook up because you want some kind of involvement. I don't think male or female anyone prefers maybe some male stereotypical, just out to have sex with as many girls as possible males. But I think most people would rather be having sex with a person than with a set of body parts. And I think that's what hookup culture kind of reduces people to.
Donna, does this sound familiar?
It does. All of the stuff that you guys are saying is one of the first things that I say when I talk to college students in big groups is that you need to know that hookup culture is a culture of pretend. You guys are all pretending for each other to like this thing that's supposedly so great. And when I went to do my study, I had the stereotypical belief that young women were going to tell me, they're going to complain about it, and then men were going to tell me how great it was. And what I got was guy after guy after guy who said, I'd really like a long-term relationship. I'm not so into this, but it's really important to be a guy on campus. You have to prove that you're a part of this. You have to show that you're good with it. And for guys to dissent, it is way more socially problematic, they think.
But I think you also have to look at the other side of the coin. There are women on college campuses. Hannah Rosen had a great piece in The Atlantic about this last year. There are women on college campuses who are deliberately choosing hookups because they're really interested in studying and doing well and advancing their careers and don't want the entanglements of a hookup. And they're getting shamed sometimes on social media for being sluts, for having casual sex. So I think that we need to not throw the baby out with the bathwater here. The question at hand is whether or not we all get to freely choose sex that actually brings us pleasure on our own terms, not whether we're having sex casually or in a relationship. There are plenty of young people and older people in relationships who are also unhappy and unsatisfied and feel like they're being pressured to be coupled up. I really think that we're asking the wrong question when we talk about casual versus committed sex. The question should be about, is sex about pleasure and about interacting with another human being versus being on somebody else's agenda?
Lisa.
But I think you construct, if I may respectfully disagree, construct a false dichotomy. I don't think a relationship, no one ever talks about a married man who's being held back because he's tied down to his wife, right? I think I do think there's probably a gender difference, maybe biologically, maybe socially, but I know for myself and for most of my female friends, they don't, maybe some women do, but most women like the strings attached sex, I think. They don't want to be reduced to an object. Now, if I may, I think that they should have every right to express themselves sexually and have casual sex if they want to. But I think women and young girls especially are very prone to internalizing the male agenda because they want to please everyone. And they've internalized maybe this idea that they're just objects and that they should want this.
But I think we shouldn't confuse being objectified and having casual sex. It's perfectly possible, and lots of women, and I'm one of them, have casual sex sometimes, and in perfectly subjective, meaning I'm the subject of my own interaction, terms. So it's very possible to have casual sex and not be objectified. And what I'm trying to do is separate those two things out.
Soraya, I want to get you in here. I want to shift gears a little bit and play you a video comment asking if this is all just old ideas playing themselves out in new ways. Have a listen.
Social media is certainly changing the way we hook up, but what's just as important is to observe the way that old ideas persist even when we have new technology. For example, look at the workarounds people have come up with to make Snapchat images last longer than their designed expiration date. Our urge to pass around photos of naked women without their consent is far more powerful than new technology. Technology shapes the way we see the world, but the way we see the world shapes the technology we have and how we use it.
So we have about 45 seconds for you to answer, but go ahead.
Okay. So yes, I think that's actually very true. We have some deeply embedded ideas about the use of bodies, especially women's bodies, and they don't often include consent, and they're infused with shame. So we know, for example, that non-consensual use of photography is twice as likely to happen at the hands of boys and men. That means they're twice as likely to pass on photographs. And I think that has to do with these ideas about how we use women's bodies and who gets to do that, who has the control over the image. And that has sort of broader implications in terms of all social media, but in terms of hookup culture,
right,
I don't think we've talked much about how that affects men and women differently.
Aha! That is a beautiful teaser. How does hookup culture affect men and women differently? To be continued at stream.aljazeera.com in the post show. But before we head there, here's Malika with some of the other stories the stream is following.
Newborn babies in the former Yugoslav republics are caught up in a political fray that's left them without identities, and parents are fed up. Thousands marched to Bosnia's parliament to demand health insurance and passports for newborns who were never issued citizen ID numbers. Twitter user AC, who was at the protest and alerted us to this story, tweets, "Since February, newborns can't get a citizen ID because of political standstill. A sick baby can't travel for vital treatment." The standstill comes from Bosniak, Croat, and Serb lawmakers who can't agree on the territorial regions that would issue the numbers. The problem dates back to the '92 Bosnian War. More and more people are joining the protest, including children. Protesters have vowed not to leave until the issue is resolved. And some lawmakers say they fear for their safety. Staff members were reportedly pictured escaping the parliament building from windows. Next, a hospital may not be the first place that comes to mind as the setting for a hip-hop video, but a Senegalese artist is changing that. A beatmaker named Ina collected audio samples at a hospital in Dakar and morphed them into this track. It's a partnership with the group IntraHealth that's designed to raise awareness about family planning in West Africa. And our last lead comes from a town in Spain, where some dog owners have received special deliveries, ones that they've least suspected. As reported by Europa Press TV, volunteers in the town of Bruneta scooped up and hand-delivered dog feces left behind by pet owners who refused to clean up after their pups. The campaign, complete with its own hashtag, Caca Express, seems to be working. The town reported a drop in dog waste since the campaign began in February. Could this strategy catch on? Share your thoughts using hashtag AJStream. Bami?
You share the nicest things. Look at her. She looks like butter wouldn't melt in her mouth, and you just share caca with us.
It'll catch on?
Oh, I think so. No more dogs pooping in the street after that little project. I am going to do a project myself on Friday, which is an open editorial, and I haven't done one before. Explain what's going to happen.
They're always a lot of fun. It's a chance for our community members to chat in directly with us and let us know what they want us to cover.
So if you want to join in, this is what you have to do. It's an open editorial, and we're looking for ideas about programs about or featuring Africa. So if you've got some insight or a great story that you think would make a 30-minute conversation and be vibrant, then tweet us at AJStream, and then you need to use the hashtag #OpenEditorial. So at AJStream, and then also include the hashtag #OpenEditorial, and then we will actually go through all of the requests and the ideas and work out who's going to make the cut. So I look forward to seeing you, hopefully in a Google Hangout tomorrow. Meanwhile, what's happening on Monday's program? Are social networking sites responsible when users commit suicide after cyberbullying? It's a really important conversation, and we'll be having that on Monday. But right now, stay with us. The post show is next at stream.aljazeera.com, and we will see you where we always are, online. Thanks for watching. Hello again, this is the Stream's online post show. We're talking about the college hookup culture and the role of social media. Helping us explore this topic, in the studio, Donna Freitas. She's the author of The End of Sex, How Hookup Culture is Leaving a Generation Unhappy, Sexually Unfulfilled and Confused About Intimacy. You put everything in the title. Is there anything in the book, Donna?
There's plenty in the book.
Okay, good. Also via Skype, we have Jacqueline Friedman, founder of Women, Action and the Media. And in our Google Plus Hangout, we have feminist blogger Soraya Shamali, college student Lisa Magliaski, and recent college graduate Evan Kurtz. I'm so glad you're all here today. It just shows when we start talking about sex, everything keeps flowing and this conversation is going. I have to be very careful of my adjectives here. Soraya, you brought up a question, didn't you? It was a good question to start off the post show with. Do you remember it?
Yes, I was asking whether and how hookup culture may differently affect men and women, given the kind of historical context of how we talk about sex, sexuality, and gender.
Nika.
And as you said that, we got tweets. Sakura Passion says, when discussing the downsides of the hookup culture, the stereotypes is that women are the ones being taken advantage of. And Sakura follows up saying, it plays on the whole men only want sex, women want love narrative. Weigh in on that, Soraya.
I think that all of the context for hookup culture is very much saturated by gender stereotypes, and they work both ways. So yes, I think there's this tremendous pressure for men to perform like studs perform. And we now live in a time when, although it's more acceptable for women to have sexual freedom, it doesn't mean that happens without penalty. I mean, Jacqueline was mentioning slut-shaming, and slut-shaming is a very real thing that happens. And to date, I'm not really aware of epidemic rates of slut-shaming men for their behavior in hookup culture. So I think those gender stereotypes can penalize both men and women, but do it in very different ways and in ways that are disproportionately harmful often to girls and women in the long run.
Evan, do you have a phrase amongst your group of mates for somebody who puts it out a lot?
I mean,
Is there a word even?
I mean, the words that you would hear commonly thrown around, you know, slut is obviously a common one, and I think that both points that made are completely right. I think that's just not a fear as you enter a hookup culture, start engaging, you know, in casual hookups or sex with many people. As guys, I agree. There's no epidemic rate. There's no sort of even shaming, I think, of it at all on college campuses that I can see. And that is, it's a real issue.
You mean shaming of men or
men,
of
yes.
women?
I'm agreeing
right.
with them.
Okay.
I don't think the men exist. I think there's clearly that. And that is, I'd say the most clear difference between the two is that
right.
you don't have that risk is not attached when I would decide to enter this culture. That risk is not attached that I'm perhaps putting up how I'm going to be viewed personally, what people can think about me as a human being. Where I think that unfortunately is something that from experience, is something would carry through on the other side.
Sure, because women have names for men who put it out a lot, just that men don't have names for themselves, which is intriguing.
They also don't have negative connotations to them, whereas the ones for women do.
Donna, you wanted to put us straight on something. Having spent 8 years in college students' sex lives, what did you want to add?
Well, one of the things that for me, this isn't about casual versus committed. When I talk to college students, what I want to know from them is, why are you doing this? And is it something that you're choosing? Is it something that you feel excited about? Is it something that you want? And when all the feedback, comes from students saying, it's not really what I want to do, I feel like I have to do this, it feels like an obligation, what I really want is X, but what I have to do is Y. I start to ask them, well, why are you doing this if it doesn't make you happy? Why are you doing this if it doesn't make you feel empowered? And one of the things that has been really surprising to me as, students will talk about hooking up forever, and then if I ask them, well, what is a good hookup for you? Like, what's good sex? Like, what would it look like? What would you be experiencing? These questions stump them. And one of the things that I have found out is that many students who are hooking up or who are certainly pretending to hook up to be a part of hookup culture haven't really given much thought about what they want from sex or what good sex would be to them. And I think that's a really important question.
And I think what's troubling and important about that is that bad sex is great. And bear with
Explain.
me for a second, right? So bad sex, especially when you're younger, you're the beginning of your sexual career, bad sex, and by bad sex, I do not mean sexual coercion or sexual assault. They're very different things. Sex where you try something or you try a person and you realize that that's not for you is great because you're learning about what you want. When you're not even having the room to say, this sex isn't working for me, this was a bad experience, I want to have a better one, that's where the problem is. I'm all for trying stuff, taking risks, and learning what works for you and what doesn't. It's when you don't feel like you have the room to ask the question that we're in trouble.
I think too that we live in a really puritanical place, and we can barely teach sex ed, right? We're still having arguments about abstinence. And we should actually be teaching people how to have really good sex. And we don't do any of that. I mean, we can barely scrape by giving them enough information to keep themselves healthy. And so there's a gigantic gap between keeping people kind of tied to this idea that they need to be safe, that sex needs to be safe. Sex should be fantastic and fun. And nobody that I'm aware of goes into college being well prepared and educated in that idea.
Malika and then Donna.
Well, it's interesting that Soraya just mentioned sex ed because we have a comment on Facebook. Jordan says that this hookup culture and the apps that people are utilizing is all part of sex education. He says it's gone a bit far, but it is sexual education in lieu of proper sex ed. But Evan, I want your thoughts on this next one. There's a tweet here saying hookups on social networks is just a way of giving introverts a medium to express themselves before they actually meet up. And that's echoed by the administrator of NYU Hookups on their Facebook page. They responded to us saying the anonymity of the page lets people overcome their inhibitions, be able to take the first step to really getting out there. Would you say that this was true of your friends, that they use these apps because it was easier than having to go up to a girl and talk to her?
I certainly would say that, again, my experience in college, it's not often I've seen experience of using apps, but I do think that it's changed. It does kind of depersonalize, I suppose, the nature of it. You know, that it can be something as simple as, an app, and it kind of just fuels this culture where it does kind of make a kind of a big interpersonal kind of like, we're using the word culture, but a hookup culture that is kind of based on these kind of like not real interpersonal reactions and things of that sort. And I don't know if the introvert point, I do think that it definitely has made just a, it's a more open setting now, the idea of engaging in hookups. Whether that's whatever, route you may choose to kind of try to engage in that.
Donna.
Well, back to this topic of, taking a step back or, having bad experiences or experimenting and then asking yourself, okay, well, how did that go? Do I want to do it again? And if not, like, what direction can I go in? About a third of the students who participate in my study basically just said that hookups, they felt really ambivalent about them. And so they literally would use the word whatever. It's just whatever, and I call them the whateverists because apparently hooking up is whatever. So they've learned to be ambivalent about sex. And then I had about 41% of respondents who used words like it makes me miserable and unhappy and feel duped. And so it's those students, the bored ones, and then the really unhappy ones where, I sit there and I'm like, okay, so if this isn't good for you, or it's not awesome, or you've never had a good experience, why aren't you taking a step back? Why aren't you asking yourself, how could I do things differently? And I think with regard to the social media piece, one of the things that we're learning is that, we're living on this 24/7 news cycle, right? It's go, 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 do, update all the time. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that we're not really learning to do is stop for a second and realize that we can ask ourselves, okay, maybe I'm going to take a step back. Maybe I'm going to try to do this differently.
Right.
There's just this continuation.
All right, I'm gonna end with the two youngest people on our conversation today. So Lisa, what's the last word that you want to bring to the conversation? And I'll go to Evan after that.
I think that the discussion of having good or bad sex, that's a conversation that needs to be had, but I worry that it overstates the importance of sex at the expense of the importance of interpersonal relationships, and that's what I think most people are looking for.
Right. And Evan, I'm worried about you because you've just left college and now you're out there and there's no hookup culture in the real world. How are you going to cope?
My apps, of course, as I wrote down the ones you did too. No, it's funny, Lisa actually took a point that I would agree completely, and that is, I think, it's really intertwined, relationship culture and sex culture. And I think one of the biggest movements I've seen while I've been in college is that the idea of relationships. I mean, you know, you talk about norms. I don't think that its norms have changed. I think that norms have kind of been thrown out the window as far as how more serious relationships are supposed to occur. You know, sometimes it is people who hooked up casually and then it, you know, eventually transformed, and there's some people who still expect a more traditional route of starting with a date and then moving forward.
Right.
But because there is no commonly defined thing on college campuses, I think there's often a lot of miscommunication between parties of not knowing what to expect, what the other expects, and then you just assume eventually, okay, we'll just keep it at hooking up because it's easier.
Sure.
And I think that discussion needs to happen, you know, concurrently with the one about, you know, sex and hookups. I think relationships and how we interact, especially at college, because that's a time where you come in really you developing more serious relationships.
I have no idea why you're single. You're so eloquent. Maybe this might help you out here. Thank you to all of our guests for actually being up close and personal and talking about hookup culture and their personal lives and their hookup lives. Really appreciated it. Malika, thanks for bringing the community into the conversation. What are we going to do during our Monday's program? Well, are social networking sites responsible when users commit suicide after cyberbullying? It's a really, really important conversation, and I hope you'll be part of it on Monday's AJ stream. In the meantime, you know where to find us all. We will be online. Thanks for watching.